Good morning, everyone. Today, we're having a session on Central Asia and the importance of this terra incognita for global development. Paradoxically enough, the nation, after gaining independence in 1991, became, for the first time in millennia, separated. So Central Asian integration, it's a kind of an very vital issue, a question, because I'm confident that it's not going to be prosperous either Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan without a successful neighbor. And moreover, I think this issue is attainable through developing common research and meeting EGS agenda and meeting global energy transition and developing all the tools we've been discussing here through all this our week and seminars. And I believe that creating a joint technology chain and technostructure, we could further develop our integration and establish a successful platform for tackling climate change agenda. Because we all know that it's pretty difficult to attain within the current set of technologies. Even for them, research is vital. Developing research, basic research and applied research, supporting innovation and creating ecosystem, it's extremely important. So we're going to have a row of the speakers from 4 countries. And then I'm, according to the list, I begin with mine, Kazakhstan. And the first speaker is Yerlan Galiyev, Deputy Chairman of the Geology Committee of the Ministry of Industry and Infrastructural Development of Kazakhstan. And it's Mr. Galiyev is online with us. And please, Yerlan, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me? Is everything fine? Okay. Yeah. So, hello, dear ladies and gentlemen, Khayrlı kun, Khandan Mirzalar. So today I have this very brief presentation about the current situation in the terms of transition to international systems of resources classification in terms of oil and gas in Kazakhstan. My presentation is separated to 3 parts, which the first one is the prehistory, a bit short, and then the current situation, and then what's going to happen in the future, hopefully. So the first one, please. Thank you. So currently in the Republic of Kazakhstan, we have the official classification in terms of oil and gas, which is the state classification system, which is called GKZ. GKZ is mostly based on the Soviet system, but some private companies, national companies, they perform their own reserve evaluation, which is usually done in SPPRMS, but some companies also do it in SEC. And they do it for their own corporate purposes, for the listing on international stock markets, for the maybe attracting investments, etc., etc. And but the reserves calculated by these companies, the SPPRMS reserves, are not included in the government balance sheet, which means that we, the government, we see only the reserves calculated by the GKZ system. Since 2018, the process was initiated in terms of hydrocarbons to transit from this GKZ system to international reserve system, which wasn't identified, which wasn't refined, but it was overall international system. To ease this process, the European Bank for Research and Development, they granted us some money to, and they prepared this report, which was called Development and Implementation of the International Reporting Standard, which was called KAS-PRMS. And this report was finished, and then several seminars was done to train Kazakh specialists in terms of CRISCO and SPPRMS standards. Next slide, please. So that's what was happening last few years. And according to the current plans of the government, the transition to the international reserves management system should be carried out and finalized before January 1st, 2024. But, however, today the major risk has been identified in terms of the transition, which are the problems and risks encountered during the transition in terms of the mining and the minerals to the CRISCA systems. What I mean is that in this process, some companies and some organizations inside of Kazakhstan, they saw the risks in terms of taxation risks, the fiscal risks, the technological risks, and this process is still ongoing. Of course, as you know, as some of you know, according to the code of the subsoil use in Kazakhstan, we are to be transitioned to the CRISCO system starting from January 1, 2024 in the next year. And but in terms of hydrocarbons, we still see these risks, and the government and the business they are kind of afraid for these risks to happen in the hydrocarbon sector. And also one of the risks is lack of the clear mechanism for the system of state control over the field development and the resource. What I mean is that we see the pure systems of international systems of the reserves. In some of them, the state can lose control over some of the very crucial and very important parts of the process. And especially for the geological reporting, the geological information, we see that in some of them, they lack these strict rules and regulations. And the last one, it's going to be the stress for the industry. We understand that. We talked with organizations, with NGOs in Kazakhstan, and some of them, they say that it's a very huge transition, very huge leap for us. And there are a large number of geologists and institutes and companies that have to be reformatted to this new system. Next slide, please. So what to do? What's going to happen? Overall, we understand that this transition is inevitable, and in any way we need to change. We need to switch to the new system. And so that's why the large businesses in Kazakhstan, which are represented by the Council of Domestic Enterprises, this council is working with the government of the Republic of Kazakhstan. They initiated the amendments to the laws and to the regulation to postpone this transition to international reserve system for 5 years until January 1st, 2029. During this time, we're going to have the opportunity, we're going to have time to mitigate this risk as much as possible. Of course, we understand that we cannot do it 100% completely, but we try to do it to mitigate them as much as possible. And also the government, they give the assignments to the Geology Committee, to us, jointly with international companies and with the businesses in Kazakhstan, to develop and approve this detailed roadmap for the transition by September 2023. This work is already started, and right now we have several meetings, and we are in the process of forming this roadmap. And but the most important part is for us that all decisions on the transition and the choice of a specific international system should and must take into account both the interest of the state in the optimal and environmentally safe use of the subsoil and the interest of the business community in obtaining the maximum return on the investments. Thank you very much, and I'm prepared to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Galiyev. All right, so we go into the next speaker, who is going to be myself. All right, so my name is Chokan Laumulin. I represent here 3 institutions. So we have UNECE Sustainable Energy Committee, where I'm a vice chair. Kazakh-British Technical University, where I teach and I'm professor there. And as well the University of Cambridge, whose graduate I am. And it's all about the initiative which we've been developing for a number of years under the umbrella of Cavendish Lab, which is a department of physics, the largest and the most notable university physics department in the world. And Professor Yerlan, who was at that time head of the quantum matter group, launched this initiative on designing a basic research, fundamental research center in Kazakhstan, aiming at meeting all the goals we've been discussing today, and keep in mind the importance of natural wealth and as well human capital, which may contribute to global, not only regional, but to global development to a large extent. And thanks to Dario Liguti from the previous session, he highlighted already that initiative which has been going on for 3 years, and we're going to have the third Energy Almaty Forum at KBTU, which is Kazakh-British Technical University, in November this year. You're welcome to register and to join it. Last year was attended by Assistant to General Secretary from New York, and as well, it was attended by head of the Cavendish Lab, Professor Andy Parker, who specifically came to back up and support the ICAST initiative here. And ICAST aims at establishing a linked fundamental science laboratory and commercialization platform via certification in order to nucleate an innovation ecosystem focused on the mining and metallurgy industry sector of Kazakhstan, as well as agriculture. Certification is a pretty vital issue for all the Central Asian countries because there is no fully certified international lab. And the demand is quite big. According to Chokan Samruk, which is our national mining company, this sector spends from 200 to 600 millions of dollars annually only on certification. And the same, a similar thing happening in agricultural sectors, in all other niches of the economy. And what is important, it's to use this natural wealth of vast materials and metals, it's to drive a new era of electronic refrigeration and energy storage, which would underpin all other areas of technology and thus would contribute to sustainable development. And to do it, it's to develop technology beyond the current set, which is based on the hydrocarbons and the silicon-based technology. So, I mean, developing non-silicon electronics is essential. And so as well, of course, it's going to contribute to this, all the services and business consultancies and IP right to the sector. How it's going to happen, I show you our scape all this evidence through, as you all know, how this algebra development works. So an ecosystem in which human capital is born and science and culture together as a grasping perfect principles of nature and culture, they lead to engineering. All the 7 levels, we're not going to focus on, they lead into technology innovation and creating our industry, economy, and finance. And which is important, I want to talk about very recent discovery, but one thing should be mentioned. Here is the, on the picture on my right is Professor Ydyryshev, Mikhail Ydyryshev from Max Planck Institute for Chemistry. He the discoverer of the whole global phenomenon of room temperature, super conductivity. And you may see the superconductor. So in 2015, he published this paper, and I believe that one of the future Nobel Prizes will go to him for this. And at that time, as you know, that what the superconductivity is a phenomenon in which conductivity is conducted with 0 losses. So once superconductivity is present, so it's continued till the end of the universe. But the problem is twofold. It's extremely high or extremely low temperature. So it used to be in the physics of low temperatures and pressure. So with 2015, we made discovery some sort of -15 superconductor Celsius, and but the pressure was 166 gigapascal. However, a quiet revolution came last month, or precursor or provision of the revolution, when Nature, on the 8th of March, published an article about the discovery made by Galiyev and his team at the University of Rochester, New York, and they discovered a superconductor, not only room temperature of +21, but more essentially, which is operable under the pressure of 1 gigapascal, which allowing a large field of experimentation for the university and the research centers throughout the world. Because this kind of equipment is available in Kazakhstan, for instance. And this, of course, create a huge prospect for energy storage and transmission. Possibly our solution for meeting global transition, energy transition, and Paris Agreement is lie rather there than in today's technology. So research, developing research is essential. And we all know that Kazakhstan is blessed with all natural wealth. So in the UK, there are 26 critical minerals, and we have majority of them. And we all know that they contribute to all these magical qualities we have in our computers everywhere. So in MacBook Pro, it's color red, it's europium, green is terbium, and screen technology is indium. And what is important, that superconductor is not an exception because it's operated at endo lutetium hydride. And lutetium is one of rare earths, one of about 17 rare earth metals, and then it contains the hard rock minerals, oxenitime, exenite, and basanite, of the Serim ore field near Kokshetau. Also in Jeskazgan area, we have this. So it's thanks to the achievement of the Soviet Kazakh geology that was all discovered and processed. So here is the list I'm going to almost finish. So this is the critical metals, and surprisingly, all Central Asian region is the terra incognita, but we may contribute. So, but we need to develop research. I don't think that rare earth metals should be exported as a raw material. And there is a legislation, there is a ban on this. So only products. And yeah, here is the critical metal map of Central Asia. And for this, so at the precursor of our center, we last month, here is the Sector Saskana, it's a quantum physicist from Cambridge, and it's my rector, KBTU. So we launched a new group, research team, and now all together with Cambridge, we're gonna develop this technology or experiment more with this new superconductor, which is extremely important. So we'll launch a working group. And in addition, in Paro, I'm very happy to announce that we have launched here with Viktor Babashev, we will launch a working group with the EGRM and Sustainable Energy Committee, all together to combine our UN effort or KBTU effort, and KBTU is serving as a vehicle and umbrella for all regional research. So we welcome and we accommodate all representatives from our Central Asian neighboring countries for developing research. And our annual energy forums is one of these instruments to develop UNFC and meeting SGS. So meanwhile, I am in talk with an investor. So the center we're gonna launch near Almaty. We're gonna follow all those examples from Cambridge recent lab, and particularly Cavendish 3, which is under construction, and that Dr. Saxena is an officer in charge of transferring all their research from current Cavendish 2 into Cavendish 3 within a year or so. So Nicholas Ray, an architect who is designing this project, and he designed this Tashkent High Technology Center a decade ago. So we have this experience already. So this is the interdisciplinary basic research with physics, math, and computer science, Kapitsa wing, biology and medicine, Darwin wing, and chemistry, Fransing wing, the first professor of chemistry in the world. And here is the location. Science needs silence and calm atmosphere, and we found that especially research and quantum computing should not be bothered by traffic and something else. So we found a fantastic spot, and I'll show you. This is the future lab, which we're gonna launch. Thank you very much for your attention. Here and now, I'm in another capacity as a moderator. And I'm happy to finish with my country and looking at the list to give floor to the representative of our brotherly neighbors, Kyrgyzstan, Mr. Arkady Rogalsky, who is the Council of the State Enterprise Kyrgyzgeology and of the Ministry of Natural Resources, Ecology and Technical Safety. Arkady, the floor is yours.
Спасибо большое, Чокан.
Thank you very much, Chokan.
Так, и я представляю Кыргызстан.
I represent Kyrgyzstan. I thank you for allowing me to speak at this event. We've been hearing a lot of interesting things this morning, and I want to speak about Kyrgyzstan's experience in implementing international accounting. We have 80 years history of geological research, and we've opened in that time approximately 20,000 deposits and ore occurrences. This became possible because of the implementation of the Soviet classification system, the GKZ, which is the most comprehensive in the world to this day. But given economic changes, we wish to implement international standards so that we're on the same page. And Kyrgyzstan is doing that through implementing the UNECE. I have mentioned previously, I think, that we had 7 steps in doing that, and there are now 3 left. Political will, first of all, to implement, that's done. Second is harmonization of the classification system of Kyrgyzstan and the UNECE, and the third is implementation of the UNECE in legal instruments. If we speak of the first, political will, for that, we need to ensure that we can assess possible political, economic, and environmental risks in attracting investment and using the international investment climate to allow investors to use a language that they understand. So we created a map of harmonization of the 2 systems, and we now have been able to implement it. We have 3 case studies on critical materials and water resources. We are addressing hydrogeological resources under the UNECE, and that has proved useful in terms of future work. Now, in terms of implementing the UNECE, there are the legal aspects. The main issue is state resource management policy. We have state enterprises on the one hand, which have priority in obtaining licenses, and there are private companies and combined private-public partnerships. Either way, our mining industry needs to be able to develop, and that has led to the adoption of the mining code, which will set out the mechanisms for interaction of private business with the state and the state sector, as well as the public, in order that we can develop our mineral resources for the benefit of our country. The UNECE is the optimal way to do that in the interests of all parties, and we are implementing that through the creation and adoption of goals for development under the Cabinet of Ministers, that we're implementing that strategy. We mentioned that in September last year, and I I'm seeing that work now developing. I thank you for your attention and I look forward to questions. Thank you very much, Arkady. It was very useful to have that update. We took the Soviet heritage based on Soviet industrialization, and it's important now to move to unification and interaction, follow a single methodology, as you know, and I'll continue in Russian for now, says the speaker. Among the 5 Central Asian countries, 4 of them are Turkic peoples. We have one important republic with an ancient culture, Tajikistan, which has different roots, Iranian, Persian roots. And I would now like to give the floor to a representative of Tajikistan, Sharifa Khudobakhsh, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Energy and Water Resources of Tajikistan.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction. Good morning, participants. This is the first time I attend a meeting such as this. Previously, I had attended online. And the question of the transition to international standards is one that is a timely one for Tajikistan as well, and there is a need to implement it. Yesterday, in his statement, Mr. Hari pointed out a very important aspect. He said, we're not fighting against hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons can save us as well. And this is something that we also note. We are currently in transition to the international standards. We support this transition. And we decided to base this on documents in the oil and gas sector. You can look at these resource documents after this presentation, so I won't go into the details of the general overview of the oil and gas industry and the sector as a whole. You can have them on this. You have them on the slide here. Unfortunately, it's in Russian only, but I can say in general terms that I'd just like to note that the resources for oil and gas in Tajikistan, just as in the former Soviet Union, were traditionally calculated by a single classification, broken down by the level of geological development, the forecast, the estimated, and the developed. So these categories were subdivided into different categories themselves to the extent to which they were known and to the extent to which they could be economically developed and industrially developed. So they are divided according to industrial and non-industrial resources. We should note that of the 36,000 square kilometers of prospects for oil and gas, only 26% have been in fact studied. So in the state balance, we only reflect 26% of possible resources. The fuel and energy complex in Tajikistan does not have sufficient resources to fully develop the sector, and this applies primarily to the oil and gas sector. But I would note that in order to increase the extraction of oil and gas in the Republic, we would need to prospect new fields, which would require major investments, including foreign investments. But as you know, all foreign companies, as I found out from the presentations here, are in fact operating on the basis of international classifications. So, of course, we live in a globalized world, and we need to satisfy the requirements of a globalized economy. And this is why our republic is strongly supporting the international system, including the implementation of the United Nations framework classification for the management, the sustainable management of resources. This is also an essential factor for attracting investments. The mechanisms for implementing the new classification is a basis for providing for clear, transparent rules for the users of subsoil resources and for the accounting in the state balance. And in order, of course, to carry out this task, we will need to consult with our colleagues, both from the UNECE and the experts from our neighboring states. As was said earlier, they are already implementing this transition in their countries. And so we expect a fruitful cooperation with them, since we are only setting out on this path. And so we hope that in successive forums and events, we will be able to present our experience in this area. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Sharifa, for such an excellent presentation of the issues and the opportunities that you might encounter in developing this sector in Tajikistan. There was the third forum under the aegis of the UNECE, which is planned, so we will expect to see you there. Over the past decades, the life of humanity has changed much more under the influence of science rather than under the influence of any religion or activism. If we recall that the first industrial revolution gave us one main discovery, the steam engine, then our era gave rise to many more. For example, the electron-based technologies. And all of our industry is impossible without that discovery. But for example, if we think of the computer proto languages as the system of calculus that was developed by Newton and Leibniz, but the Newton-Leibniz equation couldn't exist without the concept of algebra as a whole. And more than 1,000 years ago, it is a people from the area of Bukhara in Central Asia, Al-Khwarizm, who developed these notions. In fact, Al-Khwarizmi led to algebra and algorithms, and 1,000 years ago, and then in the past, the locomotive became the symbol of progress, and its center was in our brotherly, dynamic Republic of Uzbekistan, to which I personally feel very warm, friendly feelings, and I always feel very much at home there. So it is my honor to give the floor to Mr. Alimkholov, the Director of Mineral Resources of the State Committee of Uzbekistan for Geology and Mineral Resources. You have the floor. Good morning, and thank you so much for your kind words. Today, what I could say is that the State Institute for Geology and Mineral Resources has been transformed for the Ministry of Resources of Tajikistan, and we bring all the extractive industries together here, including industries which carry out geological surveys. In order to introduce the international standards into our country, we are paying a special attention to the levels of classification of deposits and resource areas, taking into account the codes that we have and the framework classification. We have 12 normative documents for each of the industries. These are resource classifications, and they also indicate the stability of these documents. In addition to that, we have 25 documents that we are working on to harmonize for the purpose of harmonization. We see that the resource potential of our country is huge. Mineral resources are assessed at almost $6 trillion. And these are old data, so this has only increased. According to the explored resources, gold, in terms of gold, Uzbekistan is in third place of the world in terms of uranium in the 11th place, and in copper in 12th place. Gold extraction, for gold extraction, we're at the 9th place in the world, uranium production in 7th. The contribution to the economy of Uzbekistan of these sectors represents over 16% of national GDP. We have over 100 gold fields, and as regards uranium, we have over 30 sites and 100 areas which are prospective. With respect to hydrocarbons, we also have a significant number. With respect to the implementation of international standards, we have already completed significant work. Currently, the reserves which are have been developed are the Navoy and the Al-Malik mining and metallurgy companies. This represents the gold, uranium, ferrous metals, and with respect to hydrocarbons, we are now transferring to the international standards. Geological surveys are being conducted on over 20 different types of minerals. So we have, as I said, principally gold and uranium. But we're also working on critical minerals, nickel, cobalt, aluminum, and magnesium, and other elements. In our country, there are over $200 million, which represents the expenditure on geological surveys per annum, including for hydrocarbons. As regards the outcome of this work, we have seen an active attractiveness for foreign investors from Europe and Asia. Just last year, this covered 40 prospective areas for gold, uranium, ferrous metals, and graphite extraction. Over $75 million is the sum for 2022 alone, and that doesn't even include hydrocarbons. So that's the geological survey and exploratory work. With respect to extraction itself, if we take into consideration that in 2021, this represented $50 million, the acceleration rate now represents 150%. The implementation of international standards has led to an influx of investors for geological survey and exploratory work, and also including extraction in the well-developed fields. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm switching back into English with your permission. We are quite all right, yeah? So now we're opening the floor for Q&As. Yes, please, Ignatiy.
Hello, team. Thank you for interesting presentation. I'm Ignatiy Volnov from the Society of Petroleum Engineers, Oil and Gas Reserves Committee. And the topic you raised is very important for the understanding of the JKZ system of the ex-Soviet Union. And it is interesting your feedback What do you think? I mean, each of you as the hard legacy, maybe not hard, maybe happy legacy, and with your attempt to switch to the international. And what do you think? The first question is the key drivers of transition to international systems, and any pros and cons of the UNECE, PRNS, CRISCO, and GKZ. How do you think? And is it necessary to move ahead with the system unification or maybe prioritization? And what do you think? Yeah, this question, I believe, to everyone, and it's better to if you feel comfortable to take the floor and answer one by one.
I'm not a geologist, unfortunately. So I'm not rather qualified to answer. But я думаю, что кто-нибудь коллеги сможете ответить на
I think that colleagues might be able to answer that question.
Спасибо за вопрос. Я думаю, что
Thank you for those questions.
уже озвучали наши коллеги.
I think our colleagues already from Kazakhstan addressed that. That is to say, the risks that were taken into consideration and the need to transition to international standards. I think all of us have already said that, and we all support the introduction of the international standards, but we do take into account the risks and the requirements for the factors that we all have to take into consideration in this process. Thank you for that question. I can say about the experience of Kyrgyzstan of introducing standards of international accounting. We had a 3-page memorandum of understanding signed last year, and in the Kyrgyz Republic, we expect that within a period of 3 years, we should also be able to use those standards for risk accounting. These instruments were ready and prepared even earlier than in Kazakhstan, but given what you saw in my presentation earlier, political will is the #1 factor that needs to be implemented. And now there is a situation in our country now where certain aspects should have been a little bit more open and more transparent, but these areas have become a little less transparent. So we were not able to fully implement our work with the assistance of international experts. And now we want to study the issue of competence centers. And it's perhaps through these competence centers that we will be able to implement the UN framework classification system. And this is why we are carrying out case studies in order to study the advantages and disadvantages of the international classification. And I think that the work will be completed, or at least it is well underway. But again, we require political will. There's a political state to oversee and to control accounting.
More questions, ladies and gentlemen? Yes, please. Sorry, I didn't know, you хотели ответить, да, тоже?
Did you also want to answer? The key factors are numerous. As I said in my report, our main mining and metallurgical companies are already calculating their reserves based on the GR code. And a problem that has arisen is the development of normative documents. That is to say, regulatory documents. That is to say, all the classification, the GKZ is, and I think everyone knows this, was used in the same way throughout the Soviet space and the post-Soviet states. But subsequently, our ministry had to develop the full set of documents in line with the requirements of the GR code. Just 2 months ago, we published all of the public material, and there are 13 documents. The main are on gold, uranium, ferrous metals, and these are now being used, including in geological exploratory and survey work. So this is a system that is, at least for those areas, well implemented in our country. In addition, I can say that we also have seen that the government has paid special attention to the importance of this issue. So there have been no factors that have disrupted this work, and we believe that we have done a lot over the past 10 years to transition to these standard documents. There's another factor, and that is the actual implementation. We are now conducting awareness-raising procedures in various areas of the country. We have 7,000 geologists working in the sector approximately, and so that's a lot of people. But if we count just the geologists, that's 7,000 people. So there's a lot of work, and this work is underway.
Now we would like to ask to the same question our representative of Kazakhstan, Mr. Yerlan Galiyev. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the question. So I think that one of the main drivers is, as was mentioned by my Kyrgyz colleagues, is the political will. And in Kazakhstan, we have very strict and very clear political will to have this transition. The second one is that we don't want the state, the government doesn't want to have this double accounting. We want to have a very good understanding of our reserves, which means that this is the, like you have the firm, you want to understand what's your balance, what's your sheet. So that's why this is one of the main drivers in our state. And also that, as was mentioned by my other colleagues, is the attracting of investors, and we want to speak in the same language with the geological community in the whole world, with the investors in the whole world, and for them to understand our language too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yerlan. Yes, now we're back in our venue, please.
Julian Hilton, Chair of the Sustainable Development Goal Working Group. The questions to Mr. Kholikov, I think. I had the pleasure some years ago of working on a project in Uzbekistan and was impressed then by the rigor and precision of the arguments expressed, and I've heard that again. Excellent. My question in the context of the session as being about sustainability and sustainable development is bridged off a couple of very positive experiences I had. The first was we were working in the phosphate sector, but phosphate in that context in Uzbekistan, as I recall, is a byproduct of uranium production. It's often the other way around. And the second was that the co-location of the phosphate plant was in a place where the gold resources were being refined, which had thrown off a lot of sulfur as a byproduct, which was then used with great gratitude by the phosphate sector. I give both examples because they are indicators of circular economic thinking long before people started to call it that. And I wondered if Mr. Kholikov could comment on whether part of the plan, and maybe that's wider intention of the republics have been reporting, to move into a sort of ecosystem circular economic model where you've already got such a good foundation for doing so. That would be very interesting to us, in which case you won't be just following us, you'll be leading us.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. The environment, as we know, is of importance in our country as well. It's a highly topical issue. And this is the third year that we have phosphate extracted as a byproduct, and this is done in the context of a separate factory. And we have new developments. The feasibility study has been done for the development, for the further development of such initiatives. I am not an expert in this area, but I can say that for our republic as a whole, great importance is attached to the environment. So this is certainly an issue that is a topical one. And we have experts who are working on this. And in all extraction areas, all fields and miles, the Kalmaki gold field, as you know, as well as others, are involved in the work there. So I think that these issues will be addressed there. And again, I'll repeat that environmental considerations are a priority currently.
Thank you, Dimjulaka. Have you got more questions, or shall we? Yeah. Yes, please.
This is a question for Mr. Galiyev. Initially, I'd like to say that about 5 years ago, the Petroleum Work Group I was chair of, and we had lots of meetings in Mexico with CNH, with the president, and also Pemex. And we suggested to the president that perhaps by using UNFC at the same time as using PRMS for over a transition period, let's say 3 years, then you can transition out of using PRMS. And this was very well received by the president of CNH at that time. But I was just wondering if Kazakhstan has thought about a transition period of using the two systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. So, as was mentioned in my presentation, we are right now in the work of postponing this transition to 2029, and but we are still because all of our reports and all of our reserves are already calculated in the GKZ system. I think that the clearest path for us is to not do the double work, but to switch to one international system and then use it, or maybe harmonize our reports and our reserves to this international system. So we need to choose the easiest and the most understandable process in our country. And this process should be very clear for our business and for our subsoil users too. So I understand what you're talking about. So maybe we need to research into this process. Maybe we need to make this like a due diligence process or SWOT analysis of this suggestion of you. So thank you very much, and we'll see into that. And that's a very interesting proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Yerlan. I think. Okay, the last question, please, and we will call it a day after that.
Thank you very much. My name is Daniel Feherov on behalf of Synagon Technologies from Hungary. This information is important that our country is also a member of the Turkic organization of the Turkic countries. And my question is, this morning we heard from Mr. Liguti that UNFC implementation and digitalization go hand in hand. Digitalization is also an important pillar in this journey. My question is to the lady and to the gentleman that how your countries are standing in this journey. In the aspect of implementation of UNFC and other standards.
Who are you addressing your question to? Sorry, we can't hear you. Sorry.
I would be interested in the answer from all of them if possible. Just
Microphone for the chair, please.
Nations invest quite a lot of effort into developing digitalization and they were rather successful. But talking about implementing the UN tools and instruments, and this at UNFC, we're just at the beginning of this process. But thank you very much for this. We will reflect on that in preparing our Almaty Energy Forum in November. And by November, I will provide you with more answers. Thank you very much. All right, then thanks a lot for your attention. Hope you have enjoyed our session and wish you productive continuation. And we are leaving the floor.